In Philippians chapter 4, Paul says something absolutely amazing. He says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, I know a lot of Christians probably have that verse memorized. It's a simple phrase. You could say it 3 or 4 times and just commit it to memory really quickly. But so often, I think sometimes really powerful phrases of the Bible, we're quick to memorize that, but we're a little slow to read the verses above or the verses below to really understand what makes that phrase so powerful. And that's what I want to do right now. I want to take just a moment and share with you out of Philippians 4 why it is so astonishing that Paul would say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. What did he really mean when he wrote this to the Philippian church? Well, in verse 11 he says, not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I'm in to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I'll never forget when I finally connected the dots in that text. And I finally saw, Paul's not talking about, kind of like petty things, like, I kind of maybe have a headache at work, but I can do all things through Christ and get through the day. I mean, Paul is talking about hunger. Paul is talking about need. He's talking about lack. He's talking about not being in a good place in life. And what he says is, I've learned to be content in any and every circumstance that I find myself in. And he said, I learned the secret to facing plenty or hunger, or in facing abundance or lack. This verse really astounds me. Sometimes I think, how would I respond to God if I faced hunger? Now see, I've never been hungry. I've never had a real hunger pain, not like 1/3 of our world is experiencing right now at this moment. And I would say most of you that I'm talking to right now, you've never experienced a real hunger pain. For most of us, food is in abundance, but for so many of the world, it's not. And so this makes me question, for me to have grown up and I've never seen a bare empty refrigerator, or I've never went to bed at night and wondered, what am I going to eat tomorrow, or what am I going to feed my family? I've never been in that circumstance. So how would I respond? I wrote a couple of things down. I thought, well, would I blame God? Would I realize that it's God who could change the situation, so would I blame God for allowing it to happen? Well, Paul didn't. Paul didn't blame God. He knew that this was a stage of his life, that God was going to do something in him and through him. So what he did is he glorified God and saw an opportunity for God to strengthen his life. Would I find myself trying to bargain with God? Paul didn't. Paul didn't even pray for God to change his situation. Paul knew that this was something that was going to glorify God and make him stronger. Would I rebuke Satan? Paul didn't. Paul, he never gave credit to Satan, and he didn't try to credit Satan for the things that God was teaching him. So this marks really the maturity of Paul's life. And what it teaches us is that it is Christ that strengthens us. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's Christ that strengthens us. It's Christ that can sustain us. It is Christ that can satisfy us. Jesus taught us in Luke 12:15, a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. So don't be deceived. Don't fall into this trap that what I have or what I possess or what I can gain or what I can accumulate can make me happy. It can't. Paul said, I have learned the secret. Whether I have plenty or whether I'm in need, whether I'm hungry or whether I have more than enough food. No matter what circumstance, in any and every circumstance, he says, I have learned the secret. And what's the secret? The secret is contentment. Whatever situation I'm in, Paul said, I have learned to be content. So don't fall into the trap that you'll only be happy until you attain certain things. That you'll only be happy until you get married, or you'll only be happy until you buy that home, or you'll only be happy until you experience whatever it is that you're searching for and trying to get. Those things won't bring happiness. What brings true joy and what brings true happiness is contentment. And how do we find contentment? We find it when we realize God is the strength of my life. No matter what I'm going through, no matter what I face, it is Christ that strengthens me. So in my life, I've tried to look at this verse different. I've tried to not cheapen it. I've tried to not make it shallow. I've tried to not apply it to things that really, at the end of the day, or at the end of the week, or at the end of the year, or really at the end of my life, it doesn't really matter. I want to apply it to serious things in my life and realize that God Himself will strengthen me, and I can do all things. I can be in any circumstance because it's Christ that strengthens me. Lastly, Paul writes in the same chapter in verse 19. It amazes me how he connects this. Paul, who talked about not having enough. Paul, who was hungry. Paul, who was brought low. And this is what Paul tells Christians. And my God shall supply every need of yours. Now, when you link that to, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, do you see how that changes our perspective? So now, instead of having a pity party with God, or instead of saying, well, why do bad things happen to good people, and I'm trying to please God, I'm trying to live right, I'm trying to be a good person, so why do these things keep happening to me? That's not the kind of stuff that's not my perspective now. My perspective is God's going to get glory out of my life. And whatever is to God's glory is ultimately to my good. So what am I going to do? I'm going to realize my God shall supply every need I have through His riches, through Christ Jesus. And how is He going to supply that need? With the strength that God's able to give me. I'm going to focus on being content in life. I'm going to focus on following God in life. And I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.